Seconds. All right, welcome everyone to our Tu B'Shvat event. Shh. We're going to first have the class, and after the class, we'll explain all of the things that we're going to be eating tonight. We'll be set up even more, so we'll get to that once we finish the class. We'll be able to appreciate a lot more. Tu B'Shvat. Many of you have heard of it, some of you have not. Tu B'Shvat is known as the New Year's of the trees, Rosh Hashanah Le'ilonot, like we'll see in a second. The reason why it's called Tu B'Shvat is Tes is number 9, if you go through the alphabet. Vav is number 6, which is 15. Today is the 15th day of the Hebrew month of Shvat. I will mention that the Rebbe would always say, Chamisha Asar B'Shvat, which is the 15th day, because that's the way it's in the Mishnah, as we'll see in a second. We gave many classes over the years on Tu B'Shvat. We explained the significance of the 7 different fruits that Israel was blessed with. But today we're going to focus on 2 things. I'm going to give it very, very short what the 2 things that we're going to focus on. And then we're going to go into the details of both of these things. One concept is the importance of roots. And the second concept is the importance of putting ourselves aside of nullification in order to grow, to come to a higher level. Nice. But I'll start with the first question, and that is, why in the world are we here today to celebrate the New Year's of the trees? Last I checked, we're human beings. We're not trees. We're not fruits. So why do human beings celebrate the New Year's of the trees? All right, we'll see what that means. I will just mention the verse. It says, Ki Adam Etz HaSadeh, a man is a tree. We'll get the verse of it, exactly what that means. Tree is a symbol of strength. We'll go through a few things. Someone mentioned that today in the prayers we did not say Tachanun. Tachanun, whenever it's a special day, we don't say Tachanun. But this itself begs for a question. We're going to see in a second there are different New Years. There's New Year's of the animals. Does anyone know which day the New Year of the animals is? You can look inside the source. We'll get there in a second. But on that day, we do say Tachanun. I mean, it happens to be Rosh Chodesh. But we don't make a big deal out of it. We don't make a big deal out of it. Why is it that the New Year's of the trees is a day that's marked on the calendar? Like many know that the prayer of Tachanun was not said. People that come to shul every day, if it's a Monday and Thursday when we take out the Torah, and we have that extra prayer that we usually say, it's a big deal that we don't say Tachanun. Guys get excited for the few minutes that the prayer is less. But in order to understand this, let's go into source number 1, the Mishnah. Today what I'm going to try to do is whenever I quote someone, I want to explain the origin of who the source is, so we'll be able to relate to it a lot more. The Mishnah was the first part of the oral Torah that was written down. Originally the Torah was given, there was Torah Shebektav, Torah Shebapeh. Written Torah, 5 books of Moses, and the Torah Shebapeh, which is the oral Torah, which was meant to be given over orally from generation to generation. Towards the end of the Second Temple, Rabbi Yehuda saw that if he doesn't write it down, it's going to be forgotten. So he wrote down very short 6 books. Each book has in it many tractates, known as the Mishnah. And over there he recorded very, very, very briefly such a situation, what this one says, what that one says. Later on, the Talmud is made up of 2 parts. We have what's called Gemara, and first the Mishnah and the Gemara. So the Talmud is made up of both parts. First you have the Mishnah, and later on you have the Gemara that goes and elaborates on all of the discussions that you have in the Mishnah briefly. And more than that, it goes into all different types of discussions. Like we'll soon see, there are many stories in the Talmud, there are many interesting insights, but it's based on a Mishnah, then you have discussion. It could be 3 pages, 5 pages, 10 pages, 20 pages, until you have the next Mishnah. And that is what the Talmud is. So the Mishnah, again, was made by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi. In the Mishnah of Rosh Hashanah means the New Year, it says as following, you can look into the source. Arbe Rosh Hashanah, there are 4 New Years. Now, January 1st is not one of those New Years. So we'll see in a second what the New Year's is. Number 1, he says, on the 1st of Nisan is Rosh Hashanah for the kings. The kings of Israel count their time, how many years they're a king, from Nisan. So if a king was crowned in the month of Shvat or Adar, which is now, and Nisan is just a little over a month and 2 weeks, 6 weeks from now, the new year is going to start from Nisan, is already the second year. So a king's new year, it was written on documents. It used to be written on documents. On this date, so-and-so amount of years since the king became a king. So again, when did the king become a king? When was it established that the king is a king? Not by the day that he actually became a king, but by the month, the first day of the month of Nisan. Next, on the first day of Elul is the Rosh Hashanah for the animals. What does that mean, practically speaking? If a person has animals, you have to give every 10 has to be donated. So you have to combine them together. You would have 10, you would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the 10th one that walked out was one that a person would donate. Which ones could you combine together? There's a date. The first day of the month of Elul, anyone born before that is from the year before. Anyone born from the first day of Elul onwards is for the coming year. Now, by the way, I once heard from a rabbi, he said something very smart. He says the Torah tells you how you're supposed to give 10th of an animal. It says you would, a person had a barn, and he would open the door, he would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the 10th he would give away. Why did he have to count first 9? Why didn't he just take the first one? So he said, a person first has to thank God. Look what I'm keeping for myself. 1 is mine. 2 is mine. 3 is mine. 4 is mine. 5 is mine. 6 is mine. 7 is mine. 8 is mine. 9 is mine. 10th I'll give away. So he's trying to explain how the concept of 10, how the Torah told us to do it in a very, very interesting way, how a person could do it in a way that he'll feel comfortable giving it, easy giving it, because he sees that he's keeping 90% for himself. Now, on the first of the Tishrei, we all know, is Rosh Hashanah of the year. And by the way, it's also the Rosh Hashanah when we are judged, what's going to happen to us, right? Rosh Hashanah were written, Yom Kippur it's signed, so Rosh Hashanah we all know. Then we have, and again, I'm not giving the whole quote because some of the stuff there's different opinions on, but then the Mishnah says, B'chamisha Asar b'Shvat, on the 15th day of Shvat, which is today, is Rosh Hashanah of the trees. What exactly does that mean? What it means to say is, and I'm going to give a crash course here as well. There is different cycles that you have to know when things grew. Today, a person could give his charity wherever he wants. Yes, charity starts at home. If a person has a family member that needs, you give your family. Then you support your community before you support another community. So there are different rules given. But back then, when you lived in Israel, every year, things went to a different cause. You could have, one year, you had to bring all the money to Jerusalem. Then you would spend the money in Jerusalem, you hang around good people. Another year was for the poor people. It's interesting, I once met with a very wealthy person, and here in Toronto, and we had a conversation. He, besides himself being a very charitable person, he's involved in different organizations, and one of them is a huge organization that gives out money in Israel from different UGA, joint, I'm not sure exactly what, but from a bunch of different organizations together. And he asked me, what am I supposed to do? We have, whatever it is, a few $100 million a year that we have to give out, but the needs are much greater. We have billions of dollars that we could give. There's hospitals, there's wounded soldiers, there's Jewish day schools, there's poor people, there's Holocaust survivors. Like, it's impossible to give everyone everything. It's impossible. It's impossible to give every cause. So he asked me, what does the Torah tell us? And I explained it to him later on. I wrote up for him how back in the day it was easy. The Torah gave us clear instructions on what we're supposed to give, which we'll get back to in a second. Today I told him everything is important. But you have to also remember making sure there's a Jewish continuity is also important, because he asked me, I'm supposed to support Jewish continuity. Person doesn't have what to eat, and over here we need this, and here we need that. I said everything is important, but not to, God forbid, undermine Jewish continuity, because that is something, if we don't put an emphasis on that, then there's not going to be a continuity of Jewish people. But that's on a side note. At any rate, let's go back to our cause. Every year, there were different things that you had to give 10% from. How do you know when the year is? You don't decide it starts from January 1st. In Canada, a person can make their own fiscal year when they want, right? There's accountants in the house. I think you can make your own fiscal year when you want. You decide, this is my fiscal year. This is when we started the business. Some people do it in December, January. This is June, whenever I want. In the Torah, it doesn't work like that. In the Torah, a person had to know that anything that grew until yesterday, back in the day in Israel, today it doesn't work. You don't have it. We don't have the temple, sadly. But anything that grew up until yesterday, let's say it was the year that had to be brought to Jerusalem, that was brought. Anything that grows from now on, from Tu B'Shvat onwards, is a new cutoff day. Now that 10% is going to poor people. Now it's very, very interesting. Why the 15th day of Shvat? So there are different answers given. One answer given is that although you don't see it, it's freezing cold outside with all the snow, and even in Israel it's cold. But under the ground, it says this time of the year, things start to move around. Another answer I saw in the Talmud Yerushalmi says something fascinating. That is, today is 4 months since when? Sukkot, very good. Sukkot is the 15th day of the month of Tishrei. To the 15th month of Cheshvan, to the 15th of Kislev, to the 15th of Tevet, to the 15th of Shvat. On the 15th day of the month of Tishrei and the holiday of Sukkot, that's when we're judged for the water. That's when the water is supposed to start. We ask Hashem to start raining. Certain things we don't start, we wait because we want to wait for people to come back to their homes. But the season of rain is on the 15th day of Kislev. So rabbis tell us when you water things, it takes 4 months until it gets into the kishkis, to the inside of the bottom of the root of the trees that are growing, and therefore it's 4 months later. But at any rate, the 15th day of the month of Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, is the day that is the cutoff date. Anything before that belongs to the year before that grows. Anything that comes from the year and outwards is something that goes for the coming year. All right, very, very clear. We'll look inside the Bartanura. So the Bartanura, everyone knows the Bartanura, especially ladies. They like the wine, the Bartanura wine. They all love it. Does anyone know what's Bartanura? It's the name of a place, name of a person. Name of a Torah scholar. So the answer is it's the name of a Torah scholar. But why did he got that name? So the Bartanura was Ovadia ben Avraham. He came from a place, Bartanura, which is in Italy. So Bartanura is the place. He was the rabbi in Bartanura, and he lived in the 15th century, and he was an Italian rabbi. And he was known, he wrote a very famous commentary on the Mishnah. So on this Mishnah, he explains what does it have to do with the 15th day of the month of Shvat for the trees. So what we explained very, very quickly, he says one does not give the 10% of the fruits that budded before Tu B'Shvat together with those that budded after it. This also applies to the third year of Shemitah. Fruits that budded before Tu B'Shvat are considered from the previous year and require Meiser Sheni. Meiser Sheni is when you had to take everything that you had and spend that in Jerusalem. Whereas from Tu B'Shvat onward, it applies to Meiser Ani. Meiser Ani is the 10% that a person goes and gives to a poor person. So now we understand a technical part, what Tu B'Shvat is and how it works. Now we're going to see how it relates to us. So we take a look in the next quote. It's from Rabbeinu Gershom Or HaGoyla. He was born in 1960. We once gave a whole class why he got the name Or HaGola, the one that brought light to the exile. But that's not for now. And he says as following. Sometimes you have in certain communities, when certain things aren't going well, the community would make a fast. They would make a fast day. Besides the 6 fast days that we have in the Jewish calendar, they would make a fast day. So he writes, if a community set aside they're going to fast every Monday and Thursday for the next little while because of a problem the community had, and one of those days fall out on Tisha B'Av, he writes, my opinion is that the fast should be postponed to the next week and not observed on that day. Why? Since we do not fast on Rosh Hashanah at all, and since all 4 Rosh Hashanah dates were mentioned together, their laws are similar. So he gives a very interesting thing. He says Rosh Hashanah Leilunot is a special day, and therefore we should not fast on that day. The Jewish Code of Law says, take a look, we was mentioned before. He writes, the custom is that we don't say Tachnun on the 15th day of the month of Av, of the month of Shvat. So it's a special day. And obviously, like we said before, this begs for a explanation. Why in the world do we make such a big deal out of the New Year's of the trees? We don't fast. We don't say Tachnun. The next quote is from the Magen Avram. He wrote a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch on the Jewish Code of Law, and he writes as following. The Ashkenazi custom is to increase in the consumption of various fruits from trees, especially those which Israel was praised with. Israel was praised with, we're going to have all of them soon, is the 7 fruits that are mentioned in the Torah that Israel is praised with. Doesn't mean you don't have to have the ones that come from Israel. We'll leave that for the end of the class. I will mention that there were certain communities, certain Sephardic rabbis, back in the day, they would eat none other than 30 fruits. And they broke it up into 3 different categories. Just on a side note, it's an interesting fact. They ate 10 things that you eat, the entire thing. The covering of the fruit, the inside. For example, a grape. You eat the skin of it, and you eat the inside, and you eat the seed. Then they would eat, and they said that we all know, there's 4 worlds. I don't want to get too kabbalistic. Atzilus, Bria, Tzir, Asiya. The 10 correspond to one of those worlds. Then they would eat fruits that you eat the fruit, but you throw out the shell. For example, a olive. We assume we're going to have fresh olives. There's the pit inside. And then they would eat fruits, they would eat 10 such type of fruits. Then they would eat 10 fruits that have a peel that you take off. For example, a rimon, a pomegranate. You don't eat the you don't eat the outside. You don't eat the watermelon of the outside. You eat the inside. And they would eat 10 of each. Today, the custom has changed that we don't eat. Most people don't eat 30 types of fruits. I remember as a kid, the Rebbe would make a farbrengen on the 15th day of Av. Sometimes the night before, sometimes like here, the night going out of Tu B'Shvat. And the Rebbe would usually eat a few grapes and a fresh fig or a fresh date. That's what the Rebbe would usually eat from the fruits that Israel was blessed with. Like I mentioned before, that's a special custom that we eat from the fruits that Israel was blessed with. Doesn't mean it's coming from Israel. Here we have things coming from Israel. You have to make sure that you took off a maaser, which is not for now. We'll explain it later on. But the point is, we see that we make a big deal out of the New Year's of the trees, which obviously all of this begs for explanation. Why in the world would a human being, a man of flesh and blood, celebrate the New Year's of the trees and the fruits? So let's take a look at a verse in the Torah. The Torah tells us the following. It's in the book of Dvarim. I'll go straight to the English. We'll go quicker. It says, when you make a besiege on a city for many days, to wage war against it and capture it, do not destroy its trees by taking an ox against them. For you may eat from them, and you shall not cut them down. And then the Torah says, Ki ha'adam eitz asadeh, for man is a tree of the field. We have to see what that means. So some commentaries learn it as a way of question. Ki adam eitz hasadeh, is a man a tree of the field? You have something against a tree. You're fighting against a person, you have to take it. But most commentaries learn this in the literal sense. It's interesting to note, a number of years ago, I don't know if I'll be comfortable doing it now, but a number of years ago, I got a phone call from one of the Muslim communities here in the GTA, in Vaughan, to be more exact. And they asked me as following. They said they're doing an event, not in a church, not in a mosque, and not in a synagogue, in a public place, like a community center, a library, community center. It was like a big hall, a theater. And they want to have a neutral topic. Everyone is going to discuss something from their religion on this topic. And it's open to everyone. They advertise it. And they gave me the topic. The topic was the environment. So I wasn't sure what to do. And they kept on calling. So I asked, I'll mention him because his yard site's coming up this week, Rav David Shachat. Rabbi Shachat was a rabbi in the community for many, many, many years, a senior rabbi, someone that I used to turn to with questions that I don't know what to do. Yes, rabbis also have rabbis that they consult with. So I, some things are black and white. When it's not, I wasn't sure, maybe just let me get out of it. So he says, no, you have an opportunity to make a Kiddush Hashem, a sanctification of God's name, you should go. So I went, and I did my own research, what to talk about. One of the things is, you're not allowed to destroy a tree that gives off fruits. If a tree gives off fruits, according to Jewish law, you're not allowed to cut it down. You're not allowed to cut it down. And it's not a simple task to cut it down. More than that, I'll tell you. I come from New York. In Brooklyn, Borough Park, many of you heard of it, there was a person that wanted to expand his house, wanted to make a nice extension, a nice front entry. The problem was he had a fruit tree right in front of his house. So he built a complicated stairs going all the way around the fruit tree because he didn't want to cut down the fruit tree. You're not supposed to cut down a fruit tree. Anyways, it was a very interesting thing there. Most of the questions ended up coming to the rabbi. I'm not going to say what the other people spoke about, but it was interesting. It was an interesting evening. I found many things interesting. By the way, one of the things I found once, that the previous Lubavitch Rebbe once took a walk with his father in the woods. Somewhere in Russia, they went to what's called dacha. They went on a vacation. They went out. They would take a walk, and his father would share with him stories, different things from things that he heard growing up as a child. And he writes it himself. He writes it himself that as he was walking, he pulled off a leaf. So his father told him, "Why'd you pull off a leaf? You needed a leaf or something. It was growing. You're not supposed to cut it off just like that. If you need a stick to walk, you need something." So there is a concept, even, talking about a kosher way of the environment, not going cuckoo. Not going to go cuckoo with all different types of crazy things. But in a normal way, the Torah does tell us that if there's a tree that grows and gives a fruit, you're not allowed to cut it off. More than that, the Talmud tells us a story. And again, we explained before what the Talmud is. The Talmud tells us a story about the son of Rabbi Chanina, that he passed away at a young age. And Rabbi Chanina said that as a kid, he cut down a tree that gave off dates. And because he cut off that tree, he said that's the reason why he passed away. It's a story recorded in the Talmud. So again, the question is, why the Torah actually says, Ki Adam Eitz Hasada. But what does it mean for me and you? What does it mean? I'm not a tree, last I checked. I can't talk to a tree. I eat the fruits from the tree. But what is the Torah actually telling us? So the Even Ezra, he lived in the 1100s, he was one of the famous commentaries in the Torah. He writes something interesting. He writes, you can take a look, he says, for the life of a person is the tree of the field. Meaning to say, we live off these things. But again, this also begs for a question. Because the New Year's of the animals, we also eat from. We don't make a big deal out of it. We also eat things that grow like wheat, bread, cookies, pita, challah. We don't make a New Year of the trees for that. We don't make a New Year's for that. Why specifically the tree? So, we'll go on to explain something interesting. I'll share a little anecdote first, for the first opening, for the first explanation. And that is as following. This was in 1921. Tel Aviv was a very, very young city at the time. This is 1921. This is way before 48. And Winston Churchill was coming for a visit. Who knows who was the Israelis? Who was the mayor of Tel Aviv in 1921? All right, but who knows? Oh, Gil? Huh? Mayor Dizengoff. Everyone knows Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv. So Mayor Dizengoff, he was the mayor of Tel Aviv in 1921. And you can imagine, everyone made a huge, huge, huge welcome for the honored guest. Winston Churchill's coming. And as he's coming, Mayor Dizengoff, he was the mayor of the city, he went and he asked that they take all the trees that were planted not too far away, they should bring it in front of his house, since he's coming to his house. I believe it was on Rehov Rothschild. And they should bring all the plants and they should put it in front of his house. It should look nice. All different trees, different things that they planted. So they brought everything there, they brought it to the house. And as Churchill came, everyone was pushing. Everyone wanted to get a picture of him. And all the trees went flying. So Churchill said as following: with a tree, if you don't have roots, nothing is going to grow. That was the comment that he made. So that's what we're going to be discussing. Without roots, nothing is going to grow. End of story. What does this mean? Yeah. Yeah. All right. Shikoch. 8. All right. At any rate, so I'll try to sum it up. It's something very, very interesting. And that is, the Torah is giving us a very powerful message. If you don't have roots grounded very, very well, on the outside you can look beautiful, but you are not going to withstand things. If your roots are solid, you'll be able to overcome all different challenges. And just to give you a little insight, a very, very fascinating insight into the strength of a tree. Let's go back to the beginning of the Torah, in the book of Noah. We all know there was a flood. And what did the bird come back with? A leaf of an olive tree. And the question is, how did the olive tree survive? How did the olive tree survive? It says everything was destroyed. So some say the flood wasn't in Israel. Some say it was in Israel, it was in Gan Eden. But there's an explanation that once the Rebbe brought down, and that is, an olive tree is the strongest tree that exists. In Israel today, you have olive trees that are over 2,000 years. Trees that, for all you know, they took from them the olives they squeezed to make oil for the Bet HaMikdash. Trees that witnessed the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. They're around for so many years. We don't have other trees that are so strong. Why? So it says because the olive tree is the strongest tree. The olive tree, why is it the strongest tree? Because it has very, very strong roots. Some say the roots grow outwards in width, and because it's so big and so strong, as long as it gets the water that it needs, the trees can last literally forever. So this is one explanation. Why is it that the bird found specifically an olive branch was because that's the strongest tree that existed. And therefore there was one that managed to survive. Again, there are other answers to the question that we mentioned before. What do we see from this? That a person must have strong roots. On the outside, a person could be beautiful. You can look at a person and look nice and everything is good. But if God forbid one day something comes and things do not go the way they're supposed to, you know what happens then? They're completely gone. They're gone. But if a person has roots that are strong, then nothing in the world could go ahead and take the person down. I'll give a few examples. In the Torah, we learn about Yosef. Yosef went through the worst challenges that you could think of. His brother sold him. His master's wife tried to get him to sin. He had nothing to lose. He's the only Jewish person in the country. There's nothing to lose. The Torah tells us he almost sinned. The Talmud says he saw an image of his father. And as soon as he saw the image of his father, the source of who he was, who he came from, he said, how can I do this? And he overcame the urge and the challenge that he had to sin. When a person remembers what their roots are, when a person remembers where they came from, when a person knows what matters most, they won't come to any problems. What is the ultimate thing that we give over to our children? The children see what matters to the parents. What is it that they would go all the way out for? That is the roots that a person has. That is the ultimate roots. And if you don't have those roots, you're going to have a hard day one day. Things don't go exactly as planned. And then boom, it's wish-wash. When a person lives with a mission, they know exactly what they're here for. Why are they here in this world? When the challenges come, they'll be able to overcome it. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. But if, God forbid, there's no roots, when you go through a challenge, boom, you're gone. I'm not going to mention the whole thing, but I mentioned this many times in classes. I was going to mention it very, very briefly. Viktor Frankl wrote a book, Man's Search for Meaning. He was in the Holocaust, and he saw that everyone sadly lost the same thing. Family went through the hell you can't even imagine. And he saw that people that lived with a purpose, for them to overcome all the challenges were much easier. When a person has roots and realizes that life has a purpose, nothing is going to get to them. I'll share an interesting story. Before there was the GPS, you had to have, remember those maps days? You pull out your maps, you had to figure out. Then you got lost. You did ask for direction. You did ask for directions, right? It was a nightmare, making U-turns and God knows what. So there was a guy that was once going from Tel Aviv to Yerushalayim. He asked, how do you go? He says, very simple. Every time you come up to a crossroads, there's going to be signs. Arrow, Tel Aviv, Haifa, Beersheba. You'll know where to go. Comes to the first place, Yerushalayim right, Yerushalayim left, Yerushalayim straight. It's at night. Comes to the next place. He sees the sign was knocked down. An Israeli driver knocked down the sign. So he puts the car in park. His wife's waiting. And he gets to the car. He bends down. He gets out of the car. He bends down. And he's playing with the bottom where the sign stood. His wife asks, Mato said, what are you doing? Ishtagata, you're crazy. In the middle of the night, you're playing with dirt on bottom. He says, give me a minute. What did he do? He took the sign. The sign was originally cemented into the ground. So he saw where the sign was, based how it was standing on bottom. Once he had it on the bottom to see the puzzle comes in exactly the way it's supposed to be, he put his hands together, he looked up, and he saw which direction Yerushalayim, and he went to that direction. What is the moral of the story? When you know where you come from, when you know where your sources are, when you know what your shorashim is, when you know what your roots is, you know where to go. Yosef knew who he came from. He saw a picture of his father. How can I do something opposite what my father wants for me? I know who I am. I know what my father stands for. I know what my grandfather stands for. When a person has the roots strong, like a tree, they won't fall down. But if the outside looks very nice, it's beautiful, but they don't have any solid foundation, sadly a wind comes, and there's going to be winds in life. Life isn't simple. God gives every person different challenges. What happens when that wind comes? You can fall like a fly, God forbid. So that is the first thing that Torah is telling us, we want to discuss tonight. Ki adam eitz hasadeh, man is like a tree. If you have your roots strong, nothing is going to get to you. You're going to be able to withstand any trials and tribulations that God sends you. All right, so we'll go through it quickly. What? We'll go through it quickly. The letter from the Rebbe discusses this concept very quickly. The root is hidden from the eye. Yet the primary vitality of the tree is found within it. Moreover, it is specifically through the root that the tree stands firm, and its roots are strong. It need not fear any winds that may try to uproot it. The root is amunah, is our faith that we have in Hashem, through which a person remains connected to the source of life, the Creator. Even as one grows in wisdom, Torah mitzvahs, his life force continues to flow through his amunah, his faith in Hashem, his faith in God, his religion and his Torah. So you could be a beautiful person, you could know everything, you could study, but if you don't have the faith, if you don't have that, you're missing the boat. If you don't have the roots, you don't have the faith, then God forbid you go through a challenge, you fall. God forbid. A person's roots, the stronger that it is, you'll be able to withstand everything. So this is one reason why we say, Ki adam eitz hasadeh, a man is compared to a tree. We'll now move on to the second reason that we have, and that is as following. The way things grow is as following. You put a seed into the ground. You know what happens to the seed before it grows? It almost dissolves. You put a nice looking seed. If you open up the ground a little while later, before the tree things start to blossom, start to grow, it falls apart. Our rabbis tell us, if you want to grow, you're going to have to, for a moment, put yourself completely aside. To the point that you erase the knowledge that you already know. Because if you come in like you know it all, or that you have a certain way of doing things, you'll never be able to grow. Let's look at a story in the Talmud. Talmud tells us as following. Rabbi Zera, when he ascended to Israel, ascended to Eretz Yisrael, after he was coming from Iraq, he fasted 100 fasts that the Babylonian Talmud should not that he learned for so many years should be forgotten from his mind, so that it would not disturb him. Let's look in Rashi, the famous commentary on the Torah, on the Talmud. The Amoraim of Eretz Yisrael were not, in a way, there was. Let me give a little bit of a rewind. There's two Talmuds. It's the Babylonian Talmud and Jerusalem Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud has many questions back and forth. It's a lot more complicated to learn, if you could use those words. The Jerusalem Talmud is more, people say things, there's not too much argument, and so on and so forth. So Rashi says he was used to one way of learning. The only way that he was able to now learn a new way was if he forgets the way that he knew beforehand. Only then would he be able to absorb a new way of learning. What does this mean? When a person, I'll give you a practical example. And I dealt with this with different families. There were families that were running businesses, nice big businesses. And the father, grandfather, they had a certain way how they ran all of their inventory and all of the billing. It was on paper. There was books, exactly how it's going to run. You open up the book, you know exactly what it is. But we're living now in the 21st century. We're living now in a time when there's computers, where everything is already kept on the cloud. And a lot of the fathers and grandfathers, they said, we're not going computer, we're not going digital. We're not going digital. This business is around for 50 years. We're staying like this, and that's the way we're going to stay. Everyone knows, today you can't do that anymore. You can't keep on running a business with only paper files of everything. You could, but if you want to grow, I understand. Okay, all right. You get it. In order to learn that, you have to forget everything that you did until now. Why? Because if you're going to have that in mind, forget it. Wipe it out. Because only when you wipe it out are you going to be learning how to go ahead and do this. It's like this with everything. Doctors, you went as a kid. They didn't have a computer with a thing that would put all the information. Press here, press there. There was papers, there was files. Every time you came, they brought out this massive file. Today, everything is digitalized. A person's in a hospital, from when they come in, they're already putting in all the information. That's just the time that we're living in. In order for someone that was doing something for 30, 40 years to start to learn something new, they have to put everything that they know now aside, almost wipe it out. Only then will they have the ability to grow. In our own personal lives, what we have to realize is that we have to, many times, literally go ahead and put away our own egos, our own insights of who we are, in order to be able to absorb something else. Because the more that we are with our own ego expressing itself, we're not going to be able to learn. Not only are we not going to be able to learn, but we're also not going to be able to have a proper relationship like we'll see in a second. But before that, I want to share a fascinating story in the book of Daniel. We have here Daniel that's studying the book of Daniel. I'm only going to mention one thing of the story. There was a king named Nebuchadnezzar. And he had a dream. And the dream literally shook him he was shaken to his core. What did he see? He saw a statue. The head was made out of gold, the hand out of silver, the body from copper, and the feet were made out of earthenware. And all of a sudden, a stone is thrown on it, and everything falls apart. The problem was that he gathered together all of the people that know magic and all of his advisors. And when they came in front of him, he didn't remember his dream. He forgot his dream. And he said, tell me what my dream was. And whatever they told him was wrong. And he got upset and he killed all of them. Then he brought Daniel. And he demanded from him to tell him the dream. Daniel davened to Hashem. And he asked that the dream should be known to him. And the dream was known to him. You know what happened next? He explained him the dream. But look inside the verse, what the Torah tells us right before he was able to explain him the dream. It says as following. If you take a look, it's on the last page already. It says, then Daniel, whose name was also Beshatzar, was bewildered for about an hour, and his thoughts troubled him. He basically forgot everything. The king spoke and he said, let the dream and its interpretation not trouble you. And after that, he went on to explain to him, there's going to be 4 kings. I'm not going to go through the whole dream. There's going to be 4 kingdoms, and they're all going to fall, and only Hashem is going to stand. But the point was, before he was able to get to where the dream was, he had to first have what you call in English a blackout. It was only through the blackout, they put everything aside, was he able to go ahead and experience, to learn more. And I want to explain this in a practical sense, how it relates to every single person. Not just if you're studying, but also how it relates to us human beings, how we relate to other people, that it's only when we go ahead and put ourselves aside are we going to be able to get to the place that we need to get. The Talmud tells us, when a couple gets divorced, the altar cries. The Mizbeach sheds tears. All right? Because once a guy says, the rabbi told him, it's not a joke, but the rabbi told him, you know, you're getting divorced. If you're going to get divorced, you should know that the altar is crying. He says, okay, I cried for 40 years. Let the altar take my place now. But on a serious note, this is what it says. And the question is, why the altar? We have in the temple, we have the menorah, the candelabra. We have the shulchan. The altar, that's the place where you put the blood. That's where the animals go. It's the most coarse place. You want to say something cries? Say it's the menorah. Say it's something more spiritual, so to speak. Something more sensitive. Why the altar? So I once saw an explanation that is as following. What's done on the altar? Sacrifices is brought. The altar cries, it says, you know why you guys are getting divorced? Because you weren't willing to make a proper sacrifice. In order for marriage to happen sacrifices has to be made. And sacrifices are made on both sides. The husband makes a sacrifice and the woman makes a sacrifice. The sacrifice can mean to zip your mouth when you want something you have something to say, and not just say it, but say it in your powerful way. Hold it in. Don't say it. Just make a sacrifice. Or it could be, you're not interested in going somewhere, and your wife or husband, whichever one it could be, I don't want to get into trouble, so it could be both ways, wants to go a certain place, you have zero interest in going, you go. Why? That's your sacrifice at the time. You're putting everything away, and don't think that when you're putting something away, you feel like right now I'm a nothing. Don't think that you're losing out. On the contrary, it's through this that you're going to have growth. How does a tree grow? When you put the kernel in the ground, it disappears. Almost disappears. It falls apart. When you put your own ego apart, you're going to be able to build something together. The point of a husband and wife is not just you have a husband and wife and you do things together. The point of a husband and wife is that it should be one identity. It should be one unit, one family. And the only way that that happens is through a sacrifice. And again, the sacrifice is on both ends. And that's why the altar cries. It says, I'm Mr. Sacrifice. All the sacrifices are brought on me. I see what sacrifices are done. And if you weren't willing to sacrifice, you got a problem. And the same is true our relationship between man and God. What did God tell us to do the first time when we left Egypt? We ate matzah. Matzah is very thin food. You want to have a relationship with Hashem, don't be Mr. Hari. You're going to be Mr. Mrs. Hari. Ain't going to work. Only when a person humbles themselves will they be able to go ahead to get where they need. So we'll go through quickly the talk that the Rebbe gave. A well-known principle between one yesh is a state of existence, and another yesh, again, another state of existence, there is a ayin. Ayin is a state of nothingness which is found in between. An analogy. A seed that is planted in the ground must first decompose before it can grow into a tree, bearing fruit. Since the seed and the tree are incomparable magnitude, the seed must first undergo a state of nothingness to awaken the earth's growth potential that's found within it. Similar living beings. An egg only hatches into a chick after it rots. And likewise a man, whose defining trait is intellect, we observe that for new wisdom to emerge from the faculty of intelligence, there must first be self-nullification in all aspects of previous knowledge. That is the meaning of what we say before. You have it's a Kabbalistic meaning. I'll read it the way it's in Hebrew. Where am I here? And that is bitul metzius b'chol chelkei haseichel, putting away everything in all things of intellect. And this is what we could call at certain times a person could have you become stunned for a moment. We mentioned before, you have the blackout for a minute, and that will give you the opportunity to grow. So when a person walks into something, you know it all, you're not going to learn anything. It's only when you put yourself aside, and again, it's everything in life. It's in intellect, you want to understand something. When you want to have a relationship with a person, you want to have a relationship with God, the more that we put ourselves aside, we have room to open up, to bring people in, and not only, like we said before, we're not losing out of it, but we're actually gaining. I'm just going to conclude, because we want to I know people want to get ready to all the food. I'm just going to conclude quickly with one thing. Rabbi Chaim Leib Hildeshaim, he was a great chassid of the Alter Rebbe. Himself, they say he was a tzaddik, he was a half a Rebbe himself. And I'll just give you what he writes. You can look inside yourself. He writes that before there's tremendous light revealed, you first have darkness. Because in order for the light to come about, you have to have the darkest moment. And through that, it gives about the ability the light should come. And he explains that we live sometimes in a time where it's right before Mashiach is coming and there's so much darkness and so much suffering. Now Mashiach is going to come. And he says, yes, it's because before the light is the darkest moment. And that brings about, there should be a relation of Mashiach. It's a story that I always share by the Seder, Pesach Seder, and that is, there were once two beggars. One was Jewish, one was not. And the Jewish guy told the non-Jewish guy, Pesach is coming, don't eat for the next few days. The Jewish people bring in guests. You're going to have the time of a life. You're going to have the best meal. Sure enough, he comes to synagogue, he stands in the back. This guy gets invited to one house, this guy gets invited to another house. The non-Jewish person, he has no idea what a Passover Seder is all about. He comes in, he sees a beautiful table set up. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful tablecloth, centerpieces, whatever you can think of. China, you give him a seat. He's never been to a Seder. And the guy that runs the Seder says, the first thing we do is we got to sing the steps. He has no idea. Sing, all right. I'm starving hungry, but I guess Jewish people, they're, their culture. And the father goes, Kadesh, Orchatz, all right, no problem. The guy that's running the Seder says, the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to make Kiddush. Everyone has to fill up a cup of wine and make sure to drink the cup of wine till the end. This poor guy was fasting for 3 days because he's waiting for his meal. On an empty stomach, he drinks a cup of wine. If you ever made Havdalah on Yom Kippur after Yom Kippur on a cup of wine, you know what it is. His stomach is turning over. He says, all right, the meal's coming. I guess the Jews, they're fancy. They drink wine first. Next step, he said, we wash our hands. Everyone goes into the kitchen, sees a beautiful kitchen. He washes his hands. They come out. They tell him, now you take a piece of onion, dip it in salt water. Man, I've seen hors d'oeuvres, but such a wealthy home, a piece of onion, there's nothing else they could afford. And the poor guy has a wine and the salt water, and his stomach is going nuts. The next thing is they take out the mouth. They say, now we're not eating it. We're just breaking it in half. Which one is bigger? Which one's smaller? He's standing there. He doesn't understand what's going on. He waits a few more minutes. They take out a book, the Haggadah, and they start reading and reading. He doesn't understand. He's going nuts. He says, I know the culture. I know they pray, but come on. How much prayers do you have to do before you eat? And afterwards, they take out another cup of wine. They said, now you got to drink cup number 2. Yeah. This poor guy that has an empty stomach, 2 cups of wine, salt water, onion. He can't take it anymore. He says, now we go to wash. Oh, finally. Goes to wash. And the guy gives him a matzah. He says, you got to eat the minimum of half a matzah. The poor guy, his teeth almost broke. He says, this is what I'm waiting for. A cracker, it's disgusting. All right, I'll wait a little longer. They say the next thing you got to do is you got to eat mortar. They take out the horseradish. You got to eat a kazayas. You got to eat a good few ounces of this stuff. He takes it. He can't take it anymore. Wine, salt water, horseradish. He says, I'll wait one more second. The guy says, now what we do is we make a sandwich. We take this matzah and this horseradish and put it together. He picks himself up and he runs out of the house. He's throwing up the whole way. He's waiting for his friend, the Jewish guy. You pulled the number on me. I'm going to get you back. Not only didn't have a meal. He's waiting and he's waiting. 4 hours later, he sees his friend is moving. Oh, slowly. What a meal. What a meal. How was it by you? A meal? You're crazy. He says, what happened? He tells him what happened. He says, what did you do then? He says, as soon as I heard them making a sandwich out of these two things, I picked myself up and ran out. He goes, what an idiot. If you would have waited 1 more minute, then you have Shulchan Aruch, then the meal starts. Then you have the fish and the soup and the meat and the brisket, whatever you want you have. The story a rabbi said, in life sometimes it gets bitter and it gets harder and harder and harder, and we want to give up. And he says, hold on. Don't be like this guy that was a fool that gave up right before the meal came out. So this is what we have to realize. Before there's a light, there's a darkness. Now, obviously, we don't want the darkness. But this is what we have to go ahead and realize. So I just want to sum up the class. Today, we focus on 2 things while we compare it to a tree. Number 1, if you have the roots, nothing can take anything away. And I'll share a fascinating story. I'm sure many of you know the story. After World War II, there was a group of rabbis that tried to get back the Jewish people that were put in monasteries. In order for the parents to save them, they put them in Catholic homes that were run by the church, many children. They came back to Europe to try to get the Jewish children. Those parents didn't make it. There was not proper documentation. And the rabbis met with the priest and said, we want to have our children back. And he smiled. He said, I would love to give you back if you have any way to prove me who's Jewish. If you have no way to prove it to me, they're staying here. The rabbi said, I'm going to come back. What time do the kids go to sleep? What time do you put the kids to sleep? He said, whatever it is, 6:30. The rabbi came back. And as the kids were getting into bed, laying down, the rabbi said, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And all of a sudden he heard cries from across the room. Mami, Ima, Abba, Tati. And they came running to him. And all those kids that came running to him, he was able to take back to Israel and to America. Where did those kids get that from? Because when they were kids, younger, before their parents put them to sleep, what did they tell them? Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Those roots that they had as children, that is what kept them going. We have to think about what our roots are. What roots we're giving to our children. What roots do we have? What is the faith that we have that's strong? That no matter what happens in this world can never go away. That is one lesson that we spoke about today. And the second lesson was the concept of the seed, that it dissolves before it grows. Putting away our ego when it comes to learn, when it comes to relationship. If we could only do that, we will be living a life of better relationship with ourselves. We'll be able to learn more. We'll be able to have better knowledge. We'll be able to have a relationship with other people. We'll be able to have a better relationship with Hashem. We'll now go to the table. We'll be able to enjoy the food. We'll try to explain what we're going to be doing in a minute. All right.